Hello there and welcome to our news program coming to you live on All 24 News from Algiers. First, today's top stories. President Abdelmajid Tebboune holds talks in Algiers with Ugandan counterpart Yoweri Museveni, who is on a state visit to Algeria until Tuesday. Coming up as well, UN envoy to Libya Abdoulaye Bathily unveils the details of his initiative for holding the country's stalled elections this year. Also in our program, demonstration against pension reform plan continues in France. And what to expect after Iran, Saudi Arabia agreed to restore ties, we will find out ahead in our news. Hello again and welcome to the details. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, received on Saturday at Yoweri Boumediene International Airport President of the Republic of Uganda, Mr. Yoweri Museveni, who's on a state visit to Algeria that will last until Tuesday, March the 14th. President Tebboune was accompanied by the President of the Upper House of Parliament, Mr. Salah Boudjil, and the Chairman of the Lower House of Parliament, Mr. Ibrahim Boughali, as well as the Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman and the Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Major General Said Chengriha, and members of the government. After the official welcome, both presidents held talks in the Presidential Honor Lounge at Yoweri Boumediene International Airport. The audience took place in the presence of senior officials from both countries. Ugandan President Mr. Yoweri Museveni's visit to Algeria is of particular importance, which aims at consolidating the positive dynamism witnessed by the Algerian-Ugandan relations and cooperation. This visit would also enhance the joint commitment of the two countries in favor of the issues of the African continent and affirm their aspiration towards achieving peace and development for its peoples, foremost of which is the right of peoples to independence and self-determination. Still with President's activities, the head of state, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, sent on Friday a congratulatory message to Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping on the occasion of his re-election as head of the country by the Chinese National People's Congress. In the message, President Tebboune praised the profound Algerian-Chinese relations and the historical cooperation between the two countries, which would strengthen the comprehensive strategic partnership and take it to higher levels. Chinese President Xi Jinping was re-elected for a third term on Friday after deputies voted unanimously in his favor. To a different story now, UN envoy to Libya Abdoulaye Bathily affirmed during a press conference that the elections are necessary to restore legitimacy in the country, indicating that he is working to bring together all Libyan parties to enable the holding of the elections. Let's find out more details with Zahra Fritani.
UN envoy to Libya Abdoulaye Bathily confirmed on Saturday the possibility of creating a clear roadmap for the Libyan elections by mid-June, pointing out that the dispute still exists over the conditions for the presidential elections. On the other hand, the speakers of the House of Representatives and the High Council of State are saying that they reached an agreement on the constitutional declaration. In a press conference in Tripoli, Bathily further added that the elections are necessary to restore the legitimacy that represents the Libyan people.
A high-level team will be formed, which will be chosen by governmental and social departments and the concerned authorities, and will nominate its representative. The mission will conduct negotiations in order to reach a compromise. The high-level team will work constructively to enable comprehensive elections during this year and set a time frame for that. A clear roadmap for the Libyan elections can be drawn up by mid-June.
On the same occasion, UN envoy called on the international parties to speak with one voice and respond to the call of the Libyans in their aspiration for the elections.
The dispute over the conditions for running for the presidential election still exists, despite the announcement by the speakers of the House of Representatives and the state that an agreement has been reached on amending the constitutional declaration.
It's worth noting that Libya's interim government, put in place in early 2021 through a UN-backed peace plan, was only supposed to last until the elections scheduled for December that year. Thus, legitimate elections in Libya are the answer to achieve peace and prosperity, according to the UN envoy.
To neighboring Tunisia now. Tunisian President Mr. Kais Saied announced his plan to restore diplomatic relations with Syria more than a decade after they were broken off. Saied said during his meeting with Foreign Minister Nabil Amar on Friday evening that his country deals with the Syrian state and the Tunisian dealing with Syrian state has nothing to do with the choices of the Syrian people. The Tunisian presidency had announced earlier that President Saied had decided to raise the level of diplomatic representation of his country in Syria, and this was followed by the two parties affirming their desire to return bilateral relations to their normal track.
Nothing can justify the absence of Tunisian ambassador in Damascus and an ambassador from Syria and Tunis. The issue of the regime in Syria concerns only Syrians. We are dealing with the Syrian state. As for the choices of Syrian people, they are theirs, and we have absolutely nothing to do with them.
Still with Tunisia, but in a different manner. The Tunisian president stressed that his country rejects racial discrimination and human trafficking, but it also does not allow the presence of those who came to it illegally.
We will not accept racial discrimination or human trafficking, nor will we accept any violation of our laws. There is a law that must be applied, and there are measures that have been taken and implemented to facilitate the residence of our African brothers and sisters. Our relations with Africa are very close.
Investigation unit of Radio France and the Belgian newspaper Le Soir revealed behind the scenes of Moroccan intelligence scandal within the European institutions which shook European democracy. Let's follow more with Salman Asib.
European media investigations conducted by Radio France and Belgian newspapers revealed that Moroccan intelligence has established a network working in complete confidentiality for Morocco within European institutions to influence their decisions. It's reported to be led by a Moroccan intelligence officer named Mohammed B in exchange for millions of euros. The involvement of the Mersin regime has been declassified, revealing the pressure exerted by the official Moroccan services on European institutions to whitewash their image and extract positions that support its occupation of Western Sahara, the latest of which is the settling of the fishing and agriculture agreements. The investigation revealed further that the intelligence officer was active in both Belgium and France, where he is being prosecuted for bribery of public officials. Radio France, for its part, said that the policy of buying silence followed by the royal palace was also pursued by Moroccan Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch when he was Minister of Agriculture by trying to bribe a member of the European Parliament, José Bouvi. Such thing was reinforced by a message from Morocco's ambassador to the Union, calling on Benziri to direct the deputies' vote in favor of fishing and agriculture agreements that were nullified in the European Court. As for the Belgian newspaper Le Soir, it conducted an investigation and confirmed that the head of the European Coordination of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people, Pierre Gallon, had been subjected to Moroccan attempts for bribery.
Morocco's goal is to ensure the absence of Western Sahara from European institutions in return for imposing the alleged Moroccan vision for Western Sahara. A Moroccan journalist tried to bribe me in exchange for avoiding talking about Sahrawi issue. A member of the European Parliament sent an urgent email to all members of the European Parliament asking them to support the far-right candidate so that the Sahrawi activist would not win. This episode shows how Morocco has always been the spoiled child of the European Parliament.
It's worth noting that according to the investigation concluded since 2008, Morocco has had a special status within European institutions that allows it to benefit from a whole series of advantages without necessarily being constrained by its institutions due to bribes.
The Sudanese army announced the commitment of its armed forces to the course of the political process and warned against bidding in its name. Let's listen.
Your armed forces and its leadership reaffirm its complete commitment to the underway political process and the complete and strict attachment to the Italian Framework Agreement, which stipulates for unifying the current military institution and the establishment of a government with civil leadership in the remaining of the transitional period until the holding of elections.
The head of the United Nations mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Bintu Keita, has urged that Kinshasa authorities to open an investigation after more than 40 civilians were killed in an attack carried out by ADF rebels from Wednesday to Thursday night in the villages of Mukunde and Musa, located about 20 kilometers southeast of the city of Beni. According to a statement, MONUSCO reiterates the commitment of the UN mission to contribute, that is, to these efforts, and renews its appeal for an immediate end to the acts of violence perpetrated by armed groups against civilians. Still in Africa, the Somali army intensified its military operations to liberate areas from Jubaland state from terrorist groups. According to Somalian news agency, the first vice president of the state of Jubaland, Siadam, hailed the ongoing military operations to eliminate terrorism. Meanwhile, the special envoy of the President of Somalia for Humanitarian Affairs, Abdulrahman Abdushakur, hailed the step taken to fight terrorism and said that terrorist groups were part of the country's increased drought in the country, which is deprived peasants of farming their fields due to lack of rain. Millions of demonstrators went out to French cities for the seventh wave of protests called by French trade unions to express their rejection of the Elizabeth Borne government's draft law reforming the French pension system. The protests started by intense clashes between demonstrators and French police. The escalation in tensions comes after the French President Emmanuel Macron's silence and his refusal to receive union representatives under the clause of respecting the deadline for dialogue in Parliament.
We are still asking Macron to listen to the workers. These reforms are really being rejected by all workers. He must step back. We are asking him to withdraw these reforms.
All right, moving on. France and Britain have agreed on a multi-year financial framework to tackle migration, including dealing with small boats that bring migrants across the Channel, as well as better surveillance and intervention capacity on French soil. Also, Britain will pay France £479 million over 3 years to try to stop migrants from travelling in small ships across the Channel, helping to fund enhanced patrols, the use of drones, and a detention center. In related matter, the Italian Coast Guard ship carried 584 people to the city of Calabria, including another boat carrying 487 immigrants to the port of Crotone, near the site of a boat crash on February 26 that killed 74 people. Local officials said that 200 migrants have been rescued off the coast of Sicily and will be brought by the sea or by sea to Catania later on.
We're on the bridge of the Dattilo ship, a major unit of the Italian Coast Guard that is active since this morning in the Jonio Sea in a difficult rescue operation of 2 ships with migrants for a total number of 800 people in distress.
Still with European news, the European Union announced the holding of an international donors conference in Brussels on the 20th of March in order to support those affected by the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, within the framework of the member states of the Union providing more relief, recovery and reconstruction tools in the 2 countries. The European Commission stated in a press statement published on its official website that the European Union calls on other international partners and global donors to show solidarity with those affected in Turkey and Syria. To the Middle East now. The Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Riyad al-Maliki, has briefed the Chinese Special Envoy to the Middle East, Ambassador Zhai Jun, at his ministry headquarters in Ramallah on the latest developments in the Palestinian territories and the crimes committed by the Zionist occupation forces and settlers against defenseless Palestinians in Nablus, Jenin, and other states. For his part, the Chinese envoy affirmed his country's position in support of the absolute rights of the Palestinian people, especially with regard to the right to self-determination and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, reiterating Beijing's rejection of Zionist settlement in the occupied land. A new round of negotiations was launched in Geneva on Saturday between the Yemeni government and Ansar Allah on the exchange of prisoners under the support of the United Nations body. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Granberg, said in a press release that the 7th meeting of the Supervisory Committee for the implementation of the Detainee Exchange Agreement had begun Saturday under the chairmanship of the Office of the United Nations Envoy and representatives of the International Committee of the Red Cross, as well as parties to the conflict in Yemen. Iran and Saudi Arabia have agreed to re-establish diplomatic relations in China broker deal that could have wide-ranging consequences, but building on it, according to analysts, will prove the main challenge. Let's discover more with Islam Said in this report.
A new start that could be the first step to go to a multipolar world. A historic meeting between Iran and Saudi Arabia took part on Friday. The Mideast rivals held talks in Beijing under the sponsorship of China to restore diplomatic ties after 7 years of deadlock. Iran and Saudi Arabia released a joint communique on the deal with China. The statement calls for establishing the relations and reopening embassies within a maximum period of 2 months.
After 5 days of candid and in-depth communication, Saudi Arabia and Iran achieved a significant result in terms of improving their bilateral relations.
Such diplomatic achievement lowers the chance of armed conflict between the two countries and can pave the way for a wider convergence that will contribute to the resolution of many Arab crises in the region, including Yemen, Lebanon, and the Palestinian cause. It is seen as a heavy blow to the Zionist entity that aspired to disband some Arab states active in the Palestinian cause.
Ultimately, we agreed to open a new chapter between the Islamic Republic of Iran and Saudi Arabia after having no ties for 7 years, while observing the interests of both countries to boost security of the region and out of benevolence for the region, and to prevent unnecessary meddling by extra-regional forces, especially the Western continuous evil acts by the Zionist regime in the region.
The deal struck in Beijing represents a major diplomatic victory for China and will not be welcomed by the United States, as it could harm the latter's arms sales in the region, according to a former U.S. military officer.
If Iran and Saudi Arabia are making peace with each other, that is the path forward for many countries. It will be hard for Americans to take that, and they will try to cause it to fail.
The deal shows an economic convergence despite the political disagreements between Tehran and Riyadh, as both countries show great desire to join the BRICS. China regards this bloc as a strategic space to go towards a multipolar world and enhance the role of emerging economies in global economic decision-making.
Still with the same matter, China's top diplomat Wang Yi hailed on Friday the decision by Iran and Saudi Arabia to restore diplomatic relations as a victory for peace and dialogue. This comes after China hosted and mediated a talk between Saudi Arabia and Iran in Beijing. The event also witnessed the signing of a trilateral statement on Friday night.
The representatives of the three countries signed a joint statement. Saudi Arabia and Iran reached an important agreement and announced the resumption of diplomatic relations between the two countries. I think this is a victory for dialogue, a victory for peace, offering significant good news for today's turbulent world.
Well, now let's go to the latest updates on the Russia-Ukraine file now. The Russian Defense Ministry announced on Saturday that its forces managed to eliminate about 400 Ukrainian soldiers on 5 main battle axes, confirming that they are close to control Bakhmut. at a time when the Ukrainian army, on the other hand, is preparing to mobilize 70,000 soldiers in the Artemevsk region in Bakhmut. Here's Sofian Kinturi with more in this report.
The recent scenes from the battleground in Bakhmut revealed heavy losses on the Ukrainian ranks. That's why the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed through its announcement, in which it says 400 Ukrainian soldiers were eliminated by the Russian forces during the past 24 hours on 5 main fighting axes. The ministry added that about 75 artillery units and military equipment were destroyed in the Ukrainian firing sites in 114 regions.
Russian air defense systems shot down 4 HIMARS and Uragan missiles, intercepted 4 HARM anti-radar missiles, and destroyed 2 American-made anti-artillery radar stations in Donetsk.
As the battle raged on, the need for backup is a must. Hence, Russian forces announced the opening of recruitment centers in 42 Russian cities to fight in Ukraine to make more advances in the coming months. The Ukrainian and West side meanwhile are to supply more troops as well. A new official revealed the possibility of providing 3.5 billion euros as military aid to Kiev. This comes as a response to reiterated calls by Ukrainian forces for military aid from the West to stop the Russian advancement.
The concept and tactics of tank usage in battle will significantly change because Western tanks have higher firing range, other capabilities like digital information field. If this equipment is used properly, one can destroy the enemy before the enemy approaches its firing range.
The war in Ukraine now seems to be that of balance and symbolic victory, while the Ukrainian forces carry on their attempts to take control of the center of Bakhmut by transferring 70,000 soldiers from Zaporizhia to the Russian-held regions. Moscow says it's about few kilometers to dominate the whole region.
All right, moving on. Japan marked the 12th anniversary of the 2011 earthquake, tsunami, and Fukushima nuclear disaster on Saturday, commemorating the loss of over 20,000 people and thousands of homes rendered uninhabitable by radiation. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida attended a memorial event in Fukushima, taking part in a minute's silence to remember those who died.
The massive earthquake, the great tsunami, and the accident at Tokyo Electric Power's Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station robbed many of the prefecture's citizens of their lives. Even now, I can hardly bear the sense of grief when I think of the feelings of those who lost beloved family members, relatives, and friends.
And finally, in our program, the Peruvian Civil Defense Department announced that at least 6 people died in northwestern Peru due to floods linked to Hurricane Yaku on Friday. Officials said that the floods were caused by heavy rains and flooding of watercourses that began this week and worsened during the last 48 hours to affect urban and rural areas. Well, that's the end of our program. For more, you can always visit our social media platforms as well as our website. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for keeping it here on our channel. Bye for now.